Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the penultimate round of the ACADS, or Assetto Corsa Aussie Down Under Series ATCC Championship for 2020/2021. Of course, we did carry over from 2020, have a break over December, and squeezing in the last 5 rounds of the championship in the opening 5 weeks of 2021. And there's still a championship fight to be decided. It's not over. It could mathematically be over tonight if certain events take place, but we expect by the end of the night there will still be a mathematical possibility of 2 title contenders going into the final round at Newcastle next week. But for the moment, we are in central Victoria, on the way towards the Victoria-New South Wales border, actually about 3 hours north of Melbourne. We are at Winton Motor Raceway. We're at the old layout, the layout that was first used all the way back in 1961, and still a layout that can be used today, although it's kind of seldom used. The much shorter club layout, as it's called today, or the national layout that you are more familiar with for V8 supercars, is still available. When you see on the screen tonight, you'll see all the runoffs and all the bits of track that we aren't using, but we're using the old style tonight. Glad to have you aboard. My name is Steve DeVries. Been doing this since the very beginning of the season, all the way back, as you can see there, on the 19th of September last year. My goodness me, how far have we come? So September, October, November, we rattled off the first 10 rounds of the season. There was meant to be a couple in December, a couple of small changes with the tracks not being ready in time, and a few other priority adjustments meant that the third group of 5 races carried over into 2021. So the series has spanned the better part of 4 months and only 2 rounds to go. You can see Winton tonight, Newcastle, the streets of Newcastle, which we don't see all that often anymore. Had a couple of rounds in V8 supercars, and it's going to get a run in these 1970s and 80s touring cars next week. That should be an interesting spectacle, to say the least. Before we take a look at the track, we're going to have a look at the point standings coming into tonight, and as we mentioned just a few moments ago, there is a championship fight still to be decided. It probably will go down to the final round, but events, if they unfold in certain directions, could have a huge swing on the championship. You can see there's a little bit of a difference compared to last week, and we did have it clarified during the week as to what the point standings were. If you were watching the broadcast last week, we did say we believed that the points calculations we had were correct at the time of writing, and in actual fact, based on the knowledge we had, indeed they were. But it actually has turned out that if you remember back to Calder Park at the beginning of January, in race 2 there was an incident off the start line involving a couple of drivers, with one of them being on the grass, and former Dane Liccardo, and actually took out a couple of drivers. Now, we didn't know at the time how that penalty was going to be handed out. It turned out that the way the penalty was written was actually meant to be classed as a disqualification, but from our perspective we saw that and thought that the third place had been kept, but just the points were taken away. So naturally, when you are disqualified, it moves everybody else up the order 1 position, and you gain the points for those ones that you have inherited. So Dane Liccardo lost his 3rd place from that second race, and it meant that Shannon Wright, who finished 4th, actually ended up jumping up the order to 3rd, and everybody else behind him gained a few extra points. So that is now the official point standings with the explanations. So thank you to the ACADS crew for sorting that one out and making it abruptly clear what has transpired. So the end of the day, we have a points deficit at the top there, you can see, of 21 points between Shannon Wright and Nathan Higginson coming into tonight's penultimate round. 2 races tonight, as has been the format for the majority of the season, with the exception of Bathurst. So there's 4 races to go on the season, and a maximum of 180 points across the 4 races remaining, 90 tonight and 90 next week. The battle for 3rd, 4th and 5th is very, very close. You can see there 10 points is all it separates John Wright, Jamie Nankervis and Dane Liccardo. And Dane, by virtue of the disqualification in Calder Park and the 20-point penalty he incurred for another incident earlier on in the season up at Bathurst, I believe, if memory serves me correctly, he has found himself out of third and now down into 5th place. So he's got a little bit of work to do there. He can still mathematically and quite easily mathematically move up to third if he plays his cards right. And a few drivers we haven't seen for a little while. Terry Marwood, Brett Willis occupying 6th and 7th. Termo in 8th. Not 100% sure if Termo's going to be able to make tonight or the following round next week. Brian Walsh is out there in his XD Ford Falcon. And Dylan Call missing out on this week as well. He's trying to get a new room ready, I believe, for sim racing and hasn't quite pulled up in time, hoping to make next week. But the man behind him in the standings by just 3 points is Glenn Miles. And Glenn Miles is definitely out there tonight. So he could potentially find himself in the top 10 by the time tonight's racing is over, and then in a strong position moving forward for the final round to just see what he can do. He probably hasn't got enough points in the bank to challenge Brian Walsh between now and season's end, but it'd be good to see him in the top 10. And hopefully some of these guys on the screen here in the top 10 that aren't racing tonight can make it for next week. Time to take a look at the circuit, the self-proclaimed action track as they call it, Winton Motor Raceway. The layout you're seeing there is the layout commonly referred to as the club circuit, 2.028 kilometres long and 10 corners. You can see on your graphic there where the old pit lane complex is, which is between the modern day turns 2 and 3. So turn 3 in this layout becomes turn 1, and so on and so forth, and we end up with 10 corners. Only 2 corners less than what it is in real life with the longer 3 kilometre layout. But this is the layout that they ran all the way back in 1961 through to 1994. In 1995-96, it got a very small facelift, not very much. It kept the same layout. There was just a little bit of widening at a couple of parts of the circuit, mainly around the turn 5, 6, 7 complex, which is the part at the uppermost portion of the track map there. They just widened a few sections to make it a bit easier for people. And then in 1997, that is when it reverted to the layout we most commonly know today for V8 supercars, with the extension peeling off at the end of that straight that running down the right hand side of the map there. It turned off to the left and goes out towards where the new pit complex is, makes 2 right hand turns, and then comes all the way back along the bottom and then rejoins at the last couple of corners, that right over left over right chicane on your map there. So we're not racing that circuit tonight. A few drivers have actually done a little bit of practice and then completely forgot that it was the more older style layout, and they were trying to turn left at where turn 10 is in the modern day, and they were finding themselves doing 1 minute 38 laps, and they were wondering why that was counting. Well, we figured that one out and told them, nope, you've got to go straight on. And you'll see when we get to the qualifying session in a few moments' time, as the drivers approach where turn 10 is in the modern day version, you'll see that the brake marker boards are actually on the left, approaching the braking point for the 8th corner on the circuit, whereas in the modern day circuit they are on the opposite side, they are on the right. So if they're on the right, it means you turn left. If the brake marker boards are on the left, it means you're going to be turning right, if that makes sense. I'm sure I've made a little bit of sense there, but that's how it works. So practice session is just finished. We're just waiting on a couple of little items to be solved. And I'm looking down now. I saw a message just a few moments ago that practice session actually had been extended. It was meant to finish a couple of minutes earlier. The server had been running a little bit behind time tonight. And I saw a message that we were waiting to see if Shannon Wright was able to make it. So maybe running a little bit late. So I'm not sure how this bodes for him. being the championship lead-up. Of course, last week he missed out on the Lakeside round, which is the second round of the season that he's missed entirely. We've got Phillip Island that he missed out on as well. Lakeside he wasn't able to partake in due to some family commitments, which is understandable. With sim racing, everybody's got to squeeze their real-life commitments around the sim racing universe. And the only two drivers that have taken part in all 13 rounds so far are the men that were in second and third places on the points table in Nathan Higginson and John Wright. So their regular appearances have been rewarded with good point scoring finishes and berths in the top 3 as it stands right now. But with Shannon Wright not yet in the session, whether or not he can make qualifying and get himself a good result is anybody's guess. He has done some practice. I've been listening in during the week, and he has done a few practice laps. But whether or not he gets in for qualifying or not could mean he starts from the back, and then he's going to have to work his way forward. There's only 6 drivers here at the moment. If Shannon makes it, it'll be 7. But he could hand a nice little free kick to championship rival Nathan Higginson in the next few moments or so. Looking at the practice times, there were a pair of 1-minute 6s with the Higginson and Liccardo VL Commodores making those times. A 106.2 for Higginson, a 106.7 for Liccardo. Glenn Miles and Brian Walsh, 108.2 and 108.4 respectively, so they're pretty close together, the good mates. John Wright, a 109 flat, and Brian Munn really not with a truly representative lap time. Minute 50.0. Hoping he hasn't done the same thing everybody else has done and take the left-hand bend and go and do the normal layout rather than go straight on. We're going to hopefully see how all that pans out. And he's another driver that's had a few gremlins along the way in the last couple of rounds as well. Some wheel dramas last week and a couple of other issues earlier on in January. Hopefully he can get himself going for hopefully what would be a good result if he's able to partake in full in tonight's 2 races. Bit disappointing with the turnout here, guys. There's, I said, only 6 of yous and waiting for Shannon to make it 7. So guys that have not participated for a couple of weeks, you've got plenty of time to get yourself sorted, and by plenty of time I mean a week, to get yourselves going and come and join us for the finale at Newcastle. I know 1 or 2 drivers that would have liked to race tonight are actually taking part in a 24-hour race of Daytona in iRacing over this weekend, so of course dovetailing some of those commitments, but we'd love to see as many people turn out for Newcastle and try and finish up this season on a high and hopefully build up to a really good finale next week. We're going to get some on-track action in about 40 seconds time. There's of course the 5-minute countdown timer that takes part in between all the sessions. So practice ran for an hour, qualifying will run for 20 minutes. The 2 20-lap races probably going to take somewhere in the ballpark of about 25 minutes to complete, there or thereabouts. And there are a couple of other small adds, moves and changes that have happened between the last round at Lakeside and this round here at Winton, which we'll run through a little bit later on, and probably we'll run through them after we have had our qualifying session. And it looks like we are underway. So here we go. 20 minutes qualifying. The 2 HMR VL Commodores are the first men out and about. And I can see there's Brian Walsh exiting the lane as well. And just the 5 drivers currently in the server. Brian Munn will make it 6 if he can get himself in. And then of course Shannon Wright, the one we're waiting on to see. Could see him actually in the Discord, so I'm wondering whether or not he's actually signed into Discord but he's currently absent, or if he's actually there now but just hasn't quite got himself ready to go yet. We'll hopefully find out in the next few minutes. Now, Winton's a track that you either love it or you hate it. In certain cars, it can be quite a fun exercise. In the recently deceased, I guess we can call it, TCR Championship for Automobilista Australia, in a front-wheel drive car, it can be quite fun. V8 supercar and rear-wheel drive cars, it sometimes can be a pick of your poison. If you like it, you like it. You don't, you don't. There's been some weird and wonderful things happen here at this track, one of which happened at this corner a couple of years ago. Scott McLaughlin getting sent off and surfing out the other side and all the way down to what is currently turn 10 in the real life. And right now we are watching the opening laps being laid down by championship contender Nathan Higginson. Going round the section of the circuit that affectionately known as the cleavage to some. Actually, just looking here to see, looks like we've got a few issues with some of the audio on the trackside cameras. So we'll just cycle up and probably have to stay with the one set of cameras tonight. Higginson, a 1:05.8, so immediately getting down to business. That's quicker than what he managed to do in practice. It was a 1:06.2 from him in practice. And Liccardo at a 1:07.4 behind him, 1.5 seconds in arrears. Brian Walsh about a second slower than what he set in practice. And John Wright not that far behind, about 0.6 of a second behind Walsh. Glenn Miles looking for as the next man on the track to set a time. I think I just saw him flash across the line in the back a shot, or maybe he's exiting the lane. I'm not quite 100% sure. Or he could actually be on an outlap. Actually, where is he? Now, here he is. And it's time now, minute 15.5. So I did see a car back there. It was John Wright, not Brian Walsh or Glenn Miles. But there you go. So opening times are laid down. And now it's about trying to find the improvement from here. Higginson has had a bit of an issue. Liccardo knocks a 10th off his time. Drops it down to a 1:07.3. And here comes Brian Walsh. And, well, Walshy, let's do the honours. Let's see what you got for me. Can we have an onboard lap? We'll, actually, no, not quite ready yet, I don't believe. We've got to do a little bit of checking on a couple of things, just to see if we're right to take a flying lap with one or two people. Looks like he's actually slowing down. We'll grab him on the next run around, I think. We'll have another lap. He's actually lowered his mark to a 9.3, so he's very close to the time that he set in practice at a 9.2, and gives up the ghost. There goes John Wright with Brian Walsh off the road. Coming back to a question in a live chat from Brendan Ross, and I believe that might actually be correct. I do recall seeing that mentioned about joining the qualifying sessions mid-session, and that was after what happened at Sandown a couple of weeks ago. There was a few issues at Sandown. If people remember correctly, there was a number of track issues and a few other things as well. So maybe Shannon Wright and Brian Munn are sitting there in the Discord waiting to join in at the interval between qualifying and the race, which will go for about 5 minutes. And that will mean rear of grid starts for those two gentlemen. Don't worry, Rossi. I know you're in the chat there, and I know what you're referring to. I can understand your whatever North Queensland form of English is. Don't mean that with any disrespect, but I can understand precisely what you're on about, and now that you mentioned it, I did recall seeing it, so do not despair. All right, let's see if we can get our flying laps going here, as there's a nice controlled drift there from John Wright through the middle section around the tree at turn 6, and through turn 7 he goes and off towards the part of the circuit that we were talking about a little bit earlier. Actually, Brian Walsh is ready for us, so let's go on board with Brian Walsh. Looking from a bit of a unique camera here. This is the camera from the driver's rear view mirror. So through the opening 2 turns, which are turns 3 and 4 in the modern day equivalent, heading up to turn 3. We've used a bit of curb there. We can unsettle the car. And now at turn 4, turns to the right. One of the hardest stops on the circuit here for turn 5. You want to try and hug that apex as much as you can. Get a nice exit down around the tree on the left-hand side. And another right-hander at turn 7. And now this is the longest straight on this particular layout. Gas it up out of 7. All the way down here, you can see the brake marker boards on the left. That designates that you are turning right. You go through the run-through. This is the end of the main straight in the modern day equivalent of the circuit. Through the final 2 turns, which is turns 1 and 2 in real life, 9 and 10 for this iteration. And you flash across the line. And if you're Brian Walsh, that was a 109.498. So not a bad lap at all, and he's off the road. So not a bad lap, Walshy. Not too far away from the time that you set a little bit earlier on in the session. No real improvements, apart from Glenn Miles. He has managed to jump Brian Walsh, actually, on his last lap with a 108.785, and he backs it up with a 108.9. So back-to-back high 108s for Glenn Miles. This will be one of the very few occasions I think he's actually out-qualified Brian Walsh if he can keep this up. Car number 69. And one of the very many Volvos that have graced the field this year. Shannon Wright, Terry Marwood, Brett Willis, Jamie Dan Curvis, the 4 black Volvos you've seen before. Glenn Miles in the 69, Termo in the 51. They are the 6 Volvos. They're the ones that have been present for quite a number of rounds now. And looking down the order, I think the only other one would have been the Stephen Shadlow number 44 car. And the last time we saw him was all the way back at Queensland Raceway. So that was at round number 7. If memory serves me correctly. I'm doing the math here. Yep, round 7. We saw him there, and he ended up with the 13th place in race 1, the 4th in race 2. And we haven't seen him since. Glenn Miles sports that lap. Goes back to the pits. Still this man at the top of the timesheets. And he has not been able to better that 105.8 since the opening lap. That lap was done on his first flying lap. He's had a few stabs at trying to beat it since, but when you're tail drifting through the corner where the tree is like that, you are going to lose all sorts of time, and he's just realised that. His teammate found some improvement on that lap as well. He's down to a 7 flat, so not into the 6s like he was in practice earlier this afternoon and this evening. Best lap time at a 6.7. 3/10 away at the moment, but comfortably clear of Glenn Miles. Probably not under any direct immediate threat. He's got another 10 minutes to find some improvement here. While waiting to see if the drivers can find a little bit of improvement for their lap times. We'll have a little bit of a look at actually what's coming up at Winton in the next couple of weeks and months. I mean, they usually have a lot of the test and tune days and the track days. I believe our very own roadie was up there yesterday partaking in a little test session, or a private test session, I believe. And the one event that I do know is taking place in the next month or two up at Winton is the local Victorian State Circuit Racing Championship event, going to be held over the 27th and 28th of March. That'll be round 2. It's meant to be round 2 last year until the COVID-19 pandemic scuppered those plans. Now they've got the one round in. And there's a test day on the Friday the 26th of March. There's also some Australian Superbikes going to be taking part there across the 11th to the 14th of the same month. That is the month of March. There's a couple of test days, there's some private hire things there. And in February, I don't believe there is a huge amount of things going on. There's a lot of private hires and a number of test and tune days. There was talk of there being a Freedom 4-hour endurance event being held here for all sorts of production cars, improved production, sports cars and the like. Just to celebrate getting back to normal racing, but it looks like that one is not on the calendar anymore. And the only thing that I can see for February 27, 28 is something called an Oz Enduro Cup. And there's not a lot of detail about that at the moment. A number of drivers are boarding laps here and either sitting themselves up in the pits, or maybe they're just content. Maybe they're just going to see this session out and happy with where they are. Nope, Brian Walsh isn't. He's actually found a little bit of time now, Brian Walsh, in that last little stanza while we were having a look at the Winton calendar for IRL. He's moved into a 108.831 and Glenn Miles at a 108.785. So there isn't a lot. You can see it there. It's 46 thousandths of a second between Miles and Walsh. Brian ever going to wrestle big number 27 around. Winton is a little bit wide there at turn 5. He's done it on a couple of occasions, just left his braking a little bit too late, turned the steering wheel a bit too early. Car wants to understeer through the corner, ends up on the outside. Has to gather it up, so that's probably losing him a good couple of tenths there. And turns in quite early for turn 8. He's doing his best to follow those black lines that are on the circuit, which is the racing line, or the preferred racing line. A couple of spots is a bit narrow for some of the corners. Let's just see how he goes on this lap here. So again, a little bit wide of the apex. And does he hit the curb on the inside here? Not on this particular occasion, so stays in nice calm control. Just feathering and balancing the throttle and hits the anchors. And again, understeers through at turn 5, and now he's been upset by the curb on the inside of turn 6. Some of these curbs you can take at the right spot. Some of these curbs you need to just leave them the hell alone. And through that middle section of the track, the cleavage as it's affectionately known, you just got to stay off those curbs as much as possible. Flatter curb on the inside there is not too bad to take. You can take a little bit through here and maybe a little bit on the final one here, because you can then go all the way out to the outside there and try and use a little bit of that apron on the left-hand side to set a decent lap time while she aborts. And we have seen with Nathan Higginson going through a couple of corners, especially the opening 2, he does get quite aggressive over those opening few curbs. And we had Dane Liccardo, must have been like a disconnect, and then he's reconnected to the session. And even if he didn't reconnect, his time was probably still going to stand anyway. Again, this is going to be another one of those circuits where the qualifying session is just as long as the race session is going to be, with the number of laps. Now you work out roughly a minute 5, minute 6, minute 7 lap times for the front runners. Extrapolate that by 20 laps. It's very easy to work out. You're going to be somewhere in the realm of about 23 to 25 minutes for a race with a 20-minute qualifying session. Same thing happened at Sandown. Similar number of laps. Same thing happened at Calder Park. Same thing happened last time out at Lakeside. The shorter circuits throwing up quite interesting lap times and lap counts. Meaning it's very similar for them to be doing the equivalent amount of time on track in qualifying as it is during the race itself. And just to give you an idea of situations like that, we go all the way back to Calder Park and we have a look at the track facts there. The lap times were little on a minute and a bit, 2.28 kilometres long. And you got Sandown, which was 3.1, and again lap time sort of around the 1 minute 10 mark, and there's 18 laps there, 18 laps for Calder Park. Lakeside at 18 laps long. The minutes, the lap times were again in the 1 minute bracket and close to a 20-minute race. Tonight it's a little bit different, slightly longer lap time, minute 5, minute 6, minute 7, and a couple of extra laps long. And that's despite the fact Lakeside was a longer circuit by 400 metres. Sandown was longer than tonight by 1.1 kilometres, and Calder Park was longer than the circuit tonight by 200 metres. And the shortest circuit out of the 4 runs so far this year gets the highest number of lap count. So a little bit of a different dynamic, just shaking it up a little bit. No real rhyme or reason from what I understand. It's just all about varying it up for the drivers and seeing what they can come up with. Just 2 cars remaining on circuit at the moment, Brian Walsh and John Wright. Now, if you manage to get yourselves out of the pit lane now, you will get another lap in quite comfortably. So Higginson's elected to do just that. He's left the lane. So he'll get around to the line with probably about 50 seconds or so remaining. He'll get one more lap. John Wright's just ahead of Brian Walsh here. And he will get probably 2 more laps in, because he's close enough to the start-finish line to trigger this lap. And his lap time, best lap at the moment, 1:10.8, similar pace to practice. And he'll get across the line with about 5 or so seconds to spare right now. And if he's good enough, he'll get another lap. But no, he's braked quite early there, so I don't think he's going to get... Actually, I don't think he's actually going to do another lap at all. This will be Brian Walsh's last one. Liccardo and Miles not opting to leave the lane. They are happy with what they have. Higginson wants a faster time than that 5.8. He's going to have to pull out all the stops to do it, if he can. You can see there, just a nice amount of curb at turn 1, using all the road. A little bit wide at turn 2. Kicks up a little bit of grass. He didn't get the turn in that he wanted. But he's very smooth through this section, avoiding that really nasty curb. And the second curb on the inside there. A little bit of curb at 4. And a much better line than Walshy through turn 5. Just going to have a look at Brian Walsh and let's see what lap he can do. Higginson just upset again, just kicked up a bit of curb, sent the car wide there. So a few drivers have done that. Now, can Brian Walsh vault himself to the opposite side of the second row of the grid? What's the time look like? Getting to the line now, and no good. 1:10.7. Checkered flag is out. Last lap to be had is by Nathan Higginson. What's he got? He's pretty clean in the opening sector of the lap, but it got a bit squirrely after that, and judging by what he's just done, he has aborted that lap and realised that the gig was up. In fact, it was a 107.489 on that last tour. Oops, sorry, we've just gone to the wrong screen there for a second. We'll go back to our main holding screen here. So those that qualified in that session in correct order: Nathan Higginson fastest lap, purple lap. We don't get the sector times, but we just get the overall lap. 1 minute 5.875. The only man that was under a minute 6, and even through the practice session tonight, the only other drivers that were in the 6s were himself and Liccardo. So a 5.8 is a very, very good lap indeed. His HMR VL Commodore teammate in Dane Liccardo in second place, a 107 flat, or if you want to be correct, it's a 107.041, and he was 1.1 seconds behind Nathan Higginson. Glenn Miles, a 108.785, outpacing Brian Walsh with a 108.831. That was the closest battle for qualifying, and it goes in favour of Glenn Miles. And I don't think there'll be very many occasions, even that I can remember, not just in Assetto Corsa Aussie Down Under Series, but also in Automobilista Australia, where Glenn Miles has started in it legitimately after qualifying ahead of Brian Walsh. Very, very few instances, so that'll be one for his pocket. Both gentlemen around the same pace, and they've done very, very well to compete very, very hard there. Brian Walsh actually completed the most laps of anybody in that session at 16, which was one better than the man in 5th place, John Wright, at a 1 minute 10.870. Other drivers completed the laps in that one. Higginson completed 13, Liccardo completed 11, and Glenn Miles completed 8. Let's go do a little bit of a dive in here and see if we can actually get maybe a bit of information on the timetable, just to see what the sectors were. Higginson actually does own the sector times in all 3 sectors. So it was a 33 flat in sector 1, a 19.1 in sector 2, and a 13.3 in sector 3. So comprehensively been beaten everybody in that qualifying session. I'm just reading the chat here and just seeing that it says here at Nathan Higginson has been kicked out, so I'm not sure what's happened there. If John Wright's listening, he might want to just give me a little bit of an update as to what's going on there, because that's certainly a bit unexpected, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe there might be a little bit of a server drama or something going on here, but it looks like Higginson has just made it back. So either he had been accidentally kicked, or maybe he'd been asked to be kicked because he had an issue getting something fixed up with his game. But I can see the car is there now. He's definitely there, and now we're just waiting to get everybody else to jump back in. And we have got word Shannon Wright has made it into the session, and I can see his car is in the pit lane next door to John Wright. So confirming that's all good for Shannon Wright. And I'm noticing Brian Munn looks like he may not be making this race, which means we're down to just the 6 runners. So a little bit disappointing that we've not got the numbers of runners. We've had, unfortunately, a bit of a steady decline over the last couple of rounds. I mean, one stage we're up around 14, 15, 16 cars running on the track. The last major one when we had a big turnout was Bathurst, where we had 11 classified finishes and just the 1 retirement in Brendan Ross. And we've had, unfortunately, been on a bit of a downward trajectory since then. We had 9 drivers for Singapore. We get down to Bahrain. We also had 9. We then ended up with 8 for Calder Park. Sandown with 7. And Lakeside with 7 as well. And now we're unfortunately down to 6. Hoping we'll pick up a few drivers for the final round of the season at Newcastle, and then we can finish on a good note. Alright, looks like we've got the grid forming up. We've just got the 2-minute warning that we aren't too far away from starting this one. And if we go to live pictures now, look from the trackside camera on the exit of the final corner. Apologies for that. Trackside cameras on the final corner. looking down towards the start-finish line. You can see there the front row of Higginson and Liccardo, Miles and Walsh. And then you've got John Wright in 5th. Shannon Wright having to start at the rear of grid, even behind the Mustang safety car, which you can see there on the right-hand side. It's just the way, unfortunately, Assetto Corsa, Aussie Down Under Series, and the Assetto Corsa in general actually does it. And all we have to wait now is just for this countdown timer to get to 0, and we won't be too far away from a start. So we go on board here. That's the view from the top of the camera mounted to the safety car. And that's the onboard shot there. That's the one we're going to be using for some of the onboards tonight, as we always do. You can see the Volvo of Shannon Wright just over the left-hand side of the rearview mirror. Getting the word that we've got about 30 seconds left before we get a race start. Right, here we go. Got a set of lights. And we're looking at the front row here. How does this one go? Is there a sting in this tail in this championship? We find out now. Good launch from the Commodores. They got away very, very smartly after that one. The other guys were a little bit asleep at the wheel. Brian Walsh did not get going. And in fact, he is still managed to hang on to, he's managed to jump Glenn Miles for 3rd place. Shannon Wright's had a good start. He's immediately up to 4th place and on the outside of Walsh, and I don't think Walsh is going to fight this one, and no, he elects not to, and that's probably a very smart call. Just take yourself out of that battle and worry about your own race. So Shannon Wright not wasting any time in car 23. He has launched himself up into P3 from the back of the grid, and he now sets out in pursuit of these two Commodores. This is a track where we expected the Volvo to be favoured, and we need to get a real look here at what he can do. Traffic very kind to him in the opening half a lap, but it is Higginson, pole sitter, who will lead the opening lap of 20, and with lap 1 in the books, 19 to go. Oops, apologies guys, I forgot to remove the safety car. That's the second time that we've unfortunately had to do that. Too busy talking about the on-track action to worry about what was actually going on. So Higginson and Liccardo just joined at the hip here, getting a little bit close for comfort here as they run through the top section of the circuit. Shannon Wright is right with them. Now, there have been a couple of small changes for tonight's racing, just to even up things a little bit. The tyre warmers, which are used in a number of series, not just in sim racing, but in general around the world, they have actually been given the flick for this round. So it means your cars come to the grid with cold tyres. You've got to get the temperature in them yourself through the racing, and the medium compound is the only compound tyre able to be used throughout the night. And from what we understand through talking to some of these drivers, the VL Commodores have had to use the medium tyre compound since day dot. The soft tyre was not a feasible option, just given how the tyre warming situation works and tyre temperatures and all. They have been given the flick and said now only the medium tyre can be used. And the third thing that we found out during the week is that these pair of races tonight are a no pit stop race. So expecting 20 laps flag to flag and racing throughout. And you can see there just in that last sort of half a lap or so, Shannon Wright just trying to apply the screws to the number 35 of Dane Liccardo. Higginson using that opportunity just to escape and post a 1 minute 6.5. Liccardo a 7 flat, Shannon Wright a 6.8. Both PBs for those two gentlemen. John Wright an 11.5, that's a PB for him on that last lap. And Miles and Walsh a 10.0 and Walsh for Miles and a 9.7 for Walsh. And just notice as well, Brian Walsh has dropped behind Glenn Miles, so maybe one of those other mistakes down at turn number 4 and 5 for him. I've seen him run off a few times there in qualifying. Maybe that's all it was that was required for Glenn Miles to slip past, because Miles has got a nice little buffer at the minute of just over a second. You can see them just at the top end of the circuit there. It's the battle that we're going to be keeping an eye on for a little bit, just to see, can Higginson pull a nice little margin? Can he insulate himself from any real threat behind? At the moment, times are good. You can see it on the left-hand side there. 6.7 for Higginson, 7.2 for Liccardo, 7.3 for Shannon Wright. Maybe got to wonder whether or not the teammates and HMR are going to work together on this one and see if they can help the cause for not only Liccardo's championship charge, but also for Higginson's. Good defensive line from Liccardo here, just driving very sensibly and very straight. He's going to try and make Shannon Wright pass him the long way around at a couple of corners. He had a bit of a sneaky look late at turn 5, just trying to get him thinking here as to how he attacks this circuit. And the other battle we were just referring to, the Walsh and Miles battle, it's actually started to blow apart. Glenn Miles has actually got a pretty decent turn of pace. He's done an 8.6 on the last lap, so he's found a nice little chunk of time, just like Higginson just did with a 6.3 to Liccardo's 6.7 and Shannon Wright's 6.9. So PB for Liccardo that time around, and another purple lap for Higginson. What's Miles done? He's done another PB. He's done 108.255. So good strong lap for Glenn Miles. And Walsh with an 11.1. So he's starting to struggle just a little bit. And see just there, widened a few apexes, just not able to hit some of the marks. The track that he's already admitted he doesn't particularly enjoy. But going to circulate, get some points, do wonders for your championship, and just take the points and move on. And the only other man out there on the circuit at the moment is John Wright. He's 6 seconds in arrears of Brian Walsh. So Higginson has now skipped away to a nice little advantage, nearly 2 seconds now. And a 6.5 that time around. 6.4 for Liccardo and a 6.4 for Wright. So they gained a tenth of a second over him on that last lap. But the margin is still almost 2 seconds, and he's been nice and consistent, nice and smooth, not doing anything too untoward, avoiding those curbs at all the right spots. Just like we have been seeing throughout the qualifying session, he's doing all the right things. And here we go. Now here's the challenge. Here's the challenge from Wright again. He's had a bit of a look at the lines that Liccardo has been taking. Oh, there's a little bit of a touch there as well, was it? Or was that a little bit of wheel spin jumping out of turn 7? I'm not quite sure there, but now Wright has a bit of overlap, but the Commodore will have the legs in a straight line here. So some nice thinking by Shannon Wright, just having a bit of a look, going the long way round at turn 5, setting himself up for a little bit of a stab at turn 6, but all very fairly defended here, and this is as close as he's been. New fastest lap for Higginson, 6.1, 7.1 and 6.7 for these two on screen here. So they've now swung back the other way. As much as Liccardo is driving in his mirrors right now, Higginson has decided to pull the trigger and has opened up the gap quite nicely. Oh, a little bit of light contact there as well. You can see the rear end of the Commodore twitch. Shannon Wright getting up on the curb at 4, and that just takes away any challenge he might have down the inside at 5. Force him to go the long way here. Just holding him nicely. Nice wide line from Wright. Tried to carry the momentum. Liccardo still driving very nicely here. Now, has Wright got the drive off here? No. Again, Commodore gets the drive off. Turn 7. And it's through this section of the circuit where the Commodore just hasn't got the steps or the footwork like a ballerina just to dance through those last couple of corners. Liccardo just seems to maybe like he set it up just for some straight line pace, more so for the cornering. And that's where it's becoming Shannon Wright's trouble. He's got his measure through these corners. You can see, look, just got all sorts of pace. Mid-corner pace on the Volvo is very, very strong. But Liccardo's parking it in all the right spots at the minute. And there's the opportunity again. It just presents itself late at turn 5. And Wright has not got anywhere to go here. And, Wright tried to carry a little bit too much speed there. There was a little bit of room left. Liccardo tried to match him for speed as well. So, getting to the half distance mark here in just a few moments' time. And this has been a good defensive drive for Liccardo for the better part of the last 7 laps. He's doing his teammate a huge favour here while he skips away into the distance. And they are losing time. Another 3/4 tenths of a second that last lap around. Let's go up and take a look at how Higginson's handling these corners. You can see not a lot of car sliding that we've seen from him this time around. This track sort of doesn't really, tend to be one that you want to slide through most of the corners. It's a little bit wide there through turn 6. But this is a very measured drive so far. It's not like we've seen him before. I just noticed in the back a shot there has been a change. So Wright has managed to get a move done here, but long drag for Liccardo, and he has the advantage on the straight and under brakes. So again, good fair racing between the two of them. Hasn't been able to make it work. What we'll do, let's see it from Shannon Wright's point of view. Let's go on board. Let's follow him for a lap. Let's see how he tries to get past Dane Liccardo. You can see the real differences there in how these two drivers are attacking the course. Shannon Wright has a lot more mid-corner pace, a lot more mid-corner grip. There's a bit of understeer from Commodore in some spots, but it has got some straight line speed. There's a bit of a difference here. You can see on the last lap, Liccardo sort of treated that corner like a double apex corner, sort of ran out to the mid-track with Wright holding a tighter line. And then there's the early committed defensive lines from Liccardo, which is all fair, and really forcing Wright to go the long way here. And there's a moment here where you can see this is what happened last time, where Wright had the inside line. Liccardo wasn't able to quite get it down to the corner for turn 7, but then the important bit for him is he has the drive off. Commodore in straight line, very good. You can see here, this time it's a bit better for Liccardo. He got the apex at 8 and is a little bit better through 9, but still not perfect, and 10 was pretty good as well. but there's a few occasions where he's just a little bit out of control at some parts of the circuit and not able to hit those ideal lines, and that's what's keeping Shannon Wright in touch here. The really nimble pace of the Volvo is what's keeping him in this fight. Probably one of the best defensive drives I've seen any driver put on in this sort of machinery. A very light car versus a very heavy car. Mid-corner pace with, you know, sort of a good all-rounder we've been calling the Volvo for the majority of the year, versus a car that's pretty much as good in a straight line. Or a little slide there from Dane. Pressure maybe just starting to get to him here. A little bit of close to rat-a-tat-tat on the bumper here. A few guys throwing in their 2 cents in the live chat about how much of a buffer they think that Liccardo needs to help Higginson attain to be safe. Some guys saying it should be about 8 seconds. Right now it's at 6.8, 6.7. The pace has sort of settled down here. So the last laps for the top 3 were all mid-7s. So 7.4 for Higginson, 7.4 for Wright, and a 7.5 for Liccardo. So this gap is just sort of stabilising. And as we saw last night in the AMS Oz Super 2 Summer Series, if you can get a margin and you can just sort of keep that person at arm's length for a number of laps, as the lap count whittles away, the odds of that person catching you go down drastically. And that's precisely what Hans Brunswick did in race number 2 last night. He got out to about a 3.5 second margin over Tim Redmond. He was able to maintain that gap all the way to the pit stop sequence, and on the other side of the pit stop sequence it was the same as well, and the traffic worked out really well for him, and he was able to, you know, keep that 3 and a bit second buffer all the way right to the just about to the very end. Got close at the end, but it was enough to see him over the line after it was all said and done. Now that lap around, Higginson was slower than Liccardo and Wright behind. They took 0.3 of a second out of him. Good to see everybody still running. Glenn Miles has really broken away here from Brian Walsh, and has driven a pretty faultless race. Consistently in the 108s whenever I see him. And another lap here. This one's a 9.2. Just as the tyre's probably starting to go away a little bit, and as the tiredness factor sets in. We'll get a break in about 6 or 7 minutes time. And John Wright's now gone a lap down. So Brian Walsh just down at turn 1 was John Wright. He's just gone a lap down to the race leader. And he's on screen here. So he's going to come under direct threat from 2nd and 3rd place here. Higginson's going through turn 1 and 2. So he may or may not catch Brian Walsh after this. Okay, now the next question for these two is how they go about getting past the lap traffic in John Wright. If I was Liccardo, I'd be getting those lights on immediately. Make sure you know that he's coming. I'll be in the Discord. They're all in the Discord. Let him know you're coming. What's Wright going to do here? They're going to commit to the inside, and that's nicely driven. Good, smart, sensible driving from John Wright. Lets them have the inside line, stayed as far wide as possible. Now, this is, I was about to say, it's probably Shannon Wright's best chance if he could hang it round the outside, and he did hang it round the outside, and probably worried Liccardo out of the position, because now there's a positional change, and now Wright needs to be really committed on the exit of 7, but he's not. And the straight line pace of that Commodore, having the ability to get back to the gas just a little bit earlier, being a bit wider, was able to square the car up a little bit earlier, and he's able to out-drag Shannon Wright on that run down to turn 8. Now the next man we want to take a look at to see relative to the race leader Nathan Higginson is Brian Walsh, and he's just about 200-300 metres up the road. So he's going through turn 5 and he's on to turn 6. There he is there at turn 6, and here is your race leader. There's Brian Walsh on the other side, so not too far away. Gap is now just under 8 seconds with 3 and a little bit laps to run. So all Higginson's got to do is just manage his pace from here, and he should be right. Battle again. Second place, under siege, Liccardo and Wright. Wright is a bit further alongside this time, so he's had a better run through 7. Now, does he commit under brakes? He tries to stay. Liccardo's got to be careful not to pinch him on the apex, and that's a really job well done. He's now going to have to hold it here through the line here, and there's a little bit of bumping, a little bit of tagging, but that's not too bad. They managed to get through the last couple of corners, but Wright will have the high ground here at 1. If he decides to send it, he's decided now to pull the trigger, and there's some contact. There's a little bit of contact, and Shannon Wright says, nope, that's on me. I'll let you have that one back, and that's fair racing. So the two of them press on. That's a good, hard, fair, clean fight, in my opinion. And a very smart and sensible redress. It was Liccardo left in the space. There was just a little bit of the inside line was missed by Wright, and from at least from where I was sitting, and they will live to fight another day for another 2.5 laps. Now this is now, I wouldn't say it's mission critical for Shannon Wright. We were doing the math before tonight's races got underway, and we worked out that even if Higginson won every race from this point onwards, and Shannon Wright was to finish 3rd in all of those races, he would still win the championship, but it would be by a solitary point. So every little bit of help that Higginson can get from his teammate Dane Liccardo is worth its weight in gold at the moment. Brian Walsh has gone a lap down to Higginson. That's just happened at the beginning of this lap. And I can't say he's put a foot wrong. He's let basically on target for another Grand Schlem, which is pole, the race win, lead every lap, and the fastest lap. And he's only got one more lap to do that. Just hold on for another lap there, Higo. You don't want to be dropping it sideways at this particular juncture. And this battle for second place is certainly not over. Is Dana going to try the old switcheroo here? No, Shannon Wright looks like he may have gotten through, but now, how does this work out? Liccardo going to go for the inside at turn number 8, and alongside he is. But this time, it's the opposite way. Oh, and there's a bit of contact, and yep, that one was going to end in tears. So Liccardo now knows the gig is up. Lets him have that one back. Now, has he got anything left in the tank to maybe throw the kitchen sink right? Nope, not now he doesn't, because that is the end of that chapter and the end of that challenge on this lap. Drove such a good defensive race for the better part of 18 3/4 laps, and just in the last little bit he's come unstuck. But importantly for Dane Liccardo, what that does mean is he is going to be starting ahead of Shannon Wright in the reverse grid race, albeit by 1 spot. Brian Walsh off the road, just do the right thing here and let them have the track. Now Higo can start to celebrate. He can start to light the rears up, slide through a couple of corners, and well, that's gone a bit awry. A little bit too early maybe, perhaps. Gets the race win with the pole, with the fastest lap, and leads every lap to the finish. So Nathan Higginson in the end, home in first. Shannon Wright through the kitchen sink at Dane Liccardo. Eventually Liccardo cracked, and it was at the critical moment. So that is a very, very important second place for Shannon Wright, because it does buy him a little bit of flexibility in the championship, just with a little bit of extra margin as that points gap continues to come down. Glenn Miles, excellent 4th place, and he set his PB on the second last lap of that race at a 1:08 flat. So that is by far well quicker than what he managed to do in qualifying. Job well done from him. Be very pleased with that. Brian Walsh is the first man home, a lap down, 5th place for him. And John Wright, well, I'm not sure what he's up to over there, but he's just parked it on the run at turn 1. And Walsh is having a little bit of fun with the slides and the burnout activities, although the grass is getting a little bit of a mow to go along with it. As we start to fill in our point standings here, just to see where everybody sits after this one. And looking at the results here for Glenn Miles, that's his 3rd 4th place finish in a row, and his 4th place finish in the last 5 races as well. So good little run from him, although be it with the reduced field. But he is certainly having a nice little purple patch to the end of this series, and really showing that maybe if he had have contested the whole series, it might have actually been a bit more of a different story. Just getting a little bit of word through. There's a couple of, I guess, spies on the ground, just sorting out a couple of bits and pieces. And some of the guys are saying that Higginson actually had a puncture at the end there. So maybe the tyres just started to go. That medium tyre just lasted long enough to get home. Maybe he used up a little bit too much tyre a bit early on. The wear went down, but would have been that probably that left rear tyre that cops the most punishment, being a predominantly right-hand turning circuit. And now we wait to see how things go for the next race. We've got a little bit of a countdown timer happening here, 2 minutes or so, just to finish up this race and get everybody settled down and watered and off to the loo and get ready for another one. We're going to take a short break, and then we shall return. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, guys and girls watching in the live stream. I'm assuming it's mostly guys, but there you go. We are waiting for race number 2 to get underway here, and in a countdown time with about 4 or so minutes remaining. And after that little episode of a race, 20 minutes for that race, about 23 or 24 minutes, We're just doing the points calculations here at the minute just to see where everything sits. The second place finish for Shannon Wright then was very, very important, because had it have been third, it would have been 5 points made by Nathan Higginson in that race. But the second place means it was only a 2-point gain, and it's the same in this second race, the difference between first and second. So we'll have to see how that all shakes out. And if we do the remainder of the finishes from that race, we've got Dane Liccardo finishing third, picking up 35 points. Glenn Miles fourth with 30, Brian Walsh fifth with 28, and John Wright sixth with 25. What that actually does for the championship, especially in the third place stakes, is it puts Dane Liccardo and John Wright on a tie on points after that race, so that's 641 points apiece. But of course the tiebreaker would be going to Dane Liccardo on race wins, of which he has 3 of them, to John Wright's none. So that would be how the season pans out. That would, if the season stopped today, basically, that's how that would be decided, and that's how it's decided in the real world as well. Looks like we might be gaining another driver here too. Looking like we're going to get another one of the VL Commodores, and if it looks to me like we might have an appearance of Lime Mitch, who last saw in 2 consecutive rounds at Singapore and Bahrain, aboard car number 2, the Bob Jane T-Mart's car. And the gold and black VL Commodore looks like it might be getting ready to get up and going. While we've got this little break in proceedings, of course this series is going to be coming to an end at the end of next week, with round 15 being the final round. And on this channel, in fact, that means that there's going to be a little bit more of a different motorsport variety taking place in hopefully about a month or so's time. And what that means is it's this here on screen, the ASR Supercars Championship for 2021, or Australasian Sim Racing, the rebirth, I guess we can call it, or the rebranding of Automobilista Australia, morphing into Australasian Sim Racing to better reflect the community that all the drivers seem to come from these days. We're getting a good plethora of drivers coming across from New Zealand into the servers each night, and if anything, last night was to go by with full servers. This series is going to be one to look forward to. The top tier of supercars racing for ASR, a 10-race calendar spread out across the year. First 8 rounds you can see there. Then there's a pretty big gap for the September-October period, which will outline reasons why in just a second. Then you've got the final 2 rounds there, and a brand new high-quality Ford Mustang supercar model, which is exclusive to Australasian Sim Racing, is being offered up in this one for choice for the drivers. And of course every round broadcast live here on the Outworld Broadcasting YouTube channel, same as what it was last year for Automobilista Australia and Super 2 the year before that. This series is just about full. There's only about 2 spots left, so if you're keen to get in on some of the supercars action, please head over to the ASR Facebook page and the ASR Discord. Happy to be contacted by private message about that one. I can sort of help you out and go from there. And of course you can see there's a $5 season entry fee, and that is purely and simply to help make the cost of the Mustang model a bit more palatable. It's the model is as close as you can get to what it is in real life. In fact, the model itself was north of like $250, close to $300 I believe, for the admin team to outlay, and of course the time and effort going into preparing that model for supercars racing. So, you know, do the math, guys. 26 drivers times $5, it's only $130. It's nowhere near the amount of money being getting back in someone's pocket for it, but it does make the cost a bit more palatable. And for the drivers that have signed up so far, it is great to see the support in the ASR community for such a cause. Of course, the other series that goes along with that is Super 2. which is part of ASR as well. Happy to be helping out with that one. That broadcast takes place over on the Loose Sim Network broadcast channel on YouTube, and this series is full. So all 26 cars are taken. In fact, we're oversubscribed actually by one, so that means someone will probably end up being promoted from Super 2 to Supercars. We're yet to work that one out, but good to see the good support for that series being full. And again, same race calendar, slightly different dates, and the reason for the gap in proceedings between rounds 8 and 9 is for this one, the ASR Supercars Enduro Cup. And we're going with an old school Supercars Enduro Cup with a slightly different format, and you can see there that's the format, and that'll be released a little bit later on in the year. Now, let's get back to all things Assetto Corsa Aussie Down Under Series. We are waiting on a race start here. There's the safety car at the back of the field. There's Nathan Higginson, and let's pick up... Oh, there's Lime Mitch. What's he doing all the way back there? There's all sorts of weird, wonderful things going on here. Let's pick up the front row, which happens to be... Oh, Brian Walsh, who's just vanished, and John Wright. So that's a bit of an unusual thing for Brian Walsh, but we are away. What on earth happened to Brian Walsh? I'm not quite sure. What we do know is there's a bit of biff and barge going on back there at the opening couple of corners. So Liccardo's, of course, started ahead of Shannon Wright by virtue of finishing behind him in that race. Higginson has made his way past Wright as well. There's Brian Walsh just getting going now. So he must have had a moment where he either went back to the pits or he had a drop, and he's now had to get back out onto track. So that's a bit of a disaster. And yeah, I'm with Rossi on this one in the live chat. I'm not quite sure why Lime Mitch was so far back on the grid. Maybe just one of those Assetto Corsa things. But John Wright has held this lead of the race for a little bit. He's a little bit wide at 7. And now here come the Commodores. So Liccardo comfortably on the inside here. And I'd imagine the teammate being Nathan Higginson's going to go through. John Wright's going to stay wide here, and he lets Shannon Wright through as well. There's Lime Mitch and Glenn Miles, and you can see Brian Walsh all the way off in the background. So, oh, hang on. We've just... Something might be a little bit amiss here. We've been told final lap, but I don't think that is actually correct. We're only on lap 2. So maybe live timing just a little bit out here. SimHub timing that we've got is showing us that it is indeed a 20-lap race. And look at this scrap for first, second and third, all in the same frame. All you could toss a blanket over. This is the one for Shannon. Oh, and there's contact there. So now whose fault was that? I'm wondering if Shannon Wright got up on the curb on the inside at 6 and maybe just sent Liccardo a bit wide there, but he's going to have to gather himself up here. Just eyes forward, as McPherson would say to Win Cup, and keep pressing on. Maybe we'll get an update on the lap count as they get across the line here. Maybe it will tell us it's all good. And Liccardo is stopping. So, was he doing a drive-through? He's doing a drive-through. So he's going to come on behind Lime Mitch. And pretty well done by John Wright just to give Dane a little bit of space there. Now I'm wondering whether Liccardo has jumped the start there. Maybe that's what that penalty is for. Oh, he's wide. He's a bit wide there at 4. So this is not going to plan for Dane Liccardo. Higginson has got his hands full here. He would not have had to do this level of defensive driving before. All that pressure that went onto Dane's shoulders in race number 1 is now fairly and squarely on his teammates. Now he needs a bit of help here. He needs Liccardo to clear Lime Mitch as quickly as he can. Bit of a lock up there from Wright. He needs some of these guys to come up and help him. 6-3 for Higginson, 6-7 for Shannon Wright. You can see both drivers electing to use a bit of curb at turn number 2. Now Liccardo did he just go through the pits again? Yes, he did. So I'm wondering whether I'm not sure if he's had an issue or something here, and he's been through the lane twice. I just noticed it flash up on the left-hand side there that he toured the pit lane for a second time. Now this will be the next battle pack that we get to see. Glenn Miles, Dane Liccardo closing in on John Wright. Now, Glenn knows he's probably not in this fight and probably just needs to let Dane have the outside and run around here. And John's off the road, and now he's going to lose the pair of the spots. So they're both through at the end of the day, and a bit of smart driving there from both Liccardo and Miles to get through side by side through 6 and 7. And on we go. Shannon Wright now 6.2, so slightly quicker than Higginson last time around, although it was a PB for Higginson as well. Oh, I just saw John Wright off the road, big slide coming out of turn 8. So he'll probably slowly start to sink to the bottom of the field. And the next one we want to keep an eye on is Brian Walsh to see what sort of lap times he can produce. He was about 4 seconds quicker last time around than Wright. He is 5 seconds quicker this time around. So a couple of laps time, based on that logic, he should be right there. Back to the front. Pressure continuing to be absorbed here by Nathan Higginson for the last 3 laps. Now, Dane Liccardo lasted the better part of 18 3/4 laps before he eventually cracked. New fastest lap for Shannon Wright, 6.1, as he continues to apply the pressure. As we said, the funny part of things in this championship is Shannon Wright does not need to win any of the races moving forward from here. Podium finishes will be more than enough to secure this ATCC title, and we were working the math on finishing on 3rd places for him for every race moving forward, but he's also picked up a 2nd place just in that first race tonight, which buys him an extra 3 points of buffer. So right now, if he was to finish 3rd for the remaining 3 races, he'd end up with a 4-point advantage at the end of the season. And if he finishes 2nd here, of course, he's going to get a few more points as well. Now, Liccardo in, and is he retired? Or has he had a moment? I'm not sure what's going on there. So he's clearly having some sort of drama. And I'm wondering if he's being held there. But while he's being held in the pit lane, Shannon Wright goes through. Has Higginson got a problem? Car does not sound healthy. Trackside cameras say the car does not sound healthy. No. Is it stuck in gear, or is it blown an engine, or something's not right with this car? There goes Lime Mitch. And Higginson going extremely slowly and to a stop, and that is that. He's in the pits as well. Right, that is a huge swing in this race. Brian Walsh is into the pit lane. So there's takers on pit road that I'm not expecting to be in pit lane. So I'm wondering, have we got an issue here that we're trying to work out? So Liccardo's a retirement. Shannon Wright's leading this race and is continuing around. Lime Mitch, 2nd place on track. Glenn Miles in 3rd. Higginson, technically, says out. No, so he's back onto the circuit now. And I don't know what's happening to Brian Walsh here. Maybe there's a bit of an unusual sting in this tail. I'm wondering if my eyes and ears can get a bit of an update as what's going on. So maybe some gearbox issues for Nathan Higginson is what we were hearing. Just getting some updates about maybe the Dane Liccardo situation, just so I can see what's happening here. I've got him just on the live chat on the side here, just so I can get an idea of what's happening there. But the upshot here is Shannon Wright leads, Lymitch second, Glenn Miles third. Those are the only drivers on the lead lap, and we're only at the end of lap number 8. And getting some confirmation from the guys in the live chat who've obviously got a direct feed to the HMR Commodore camp. There was some gearbox issues for Nathan Higginson that brought him undone. Had to go back to the pit lane, get held obviously for that 30-second timer that you get held for, and then got going again and got a very, very sort of upset Dane Liccardo. I think there was I did have it right, there was a drive-through for him at some point, and when he tried to serve it, actually couldn't clear it. So there's a little bit of some not nice things going on for a few drivers. So that says to me that if there was says to me maybe Dane got a jump start or a penalty off the start line that he had to serve, and then when he tried to serve the penalty, it's actually said to him, no, you couldn't serve it when he did the drive-through. I mean, clearly we saw the drive-through on the screen. So let's put a bit of a dampener on this championship. So we'll have to get a bit of an update after this is all over and done with, but I'm sort of a little bit worried that there's going to be a few very unhappy campers after this one is all over. Looks like Liccardo's getting back into the race session here. You can see it says he's in the pits. Brian Walsh actually in the pits again. He's all the way down at the end of pit lane, so that's a little bit of a different spot from where he was when he came in to have a stop a couple of laps ago. We're now at half distance. There's Liccardo. He'll obviously be getting held for a period of time. I can just see over on the far side, it looks like Lymitch is being caught here by Higginson, but all about difference in lap times here and being a lap down versus a lap ahead. Plain out braking manoeuvre for the Chickadee number 2 Commodore. So let's start to plug in our point standings as they go now, as they provisionally run. So with a win for Shannon Wright and a 4th place is, I would say, just about as good as it's probably going to get for Higginson here. That blows the lead out to 29 points, so it's still mathematically possible at the final round that it could change hands, but it becomes a much taller order than what it was if it was a little bit different with the finishing positions tonight. Glenn Miles on the podium in 3rd place at the minute. Now, where's he relative to Higginson? Because he still needs to unlap himself ahead of Glenn Miles, and Glenn's all the way up at the top end of the circuit. So Higginson's going to have to do a lap and a half extra to get to the rear bumper of Miles and then get past him again. So highly unlikely that that is going to happen, barring a mistake. So I'm going to pencil Glenn Miles in here for a 3rd place finish. Higginson for 4th. Lymitch, we look down the order for 2nd place. I guess he's continuing to fly the Commodore flag for the moment. And then Brian Walsh at the moment currently sat up in the pits. So we classify that one, I guess, as a DNF because it doesn't look he's coming back to track. And same for Dane Liccardo and John Wright with a 5th place finish. And that's an interesting situation as well, again, because by virtue of Dane not being able to serve that drive-through penalty, that hands the advantage back to John Wright in the standings for 3rd place overall in the championship, and that's by 33 points as well. So that has gone from being a dead even stanza to being actually it's a bit more than that actually, sorry, I do apologise. It's 641 plays 679, so it's actually 36 points. So that's almost an insurmountable points deficit that Dane Liccardo needs to overhaul at the final round. What he actually needs to do, if he can, is get out there and circulate and get some points, but I don't think the game is going to let him. And yeah, the information I have is that the penalty or the points has had an issue with, sorry, getting my words a bit mixed up here. It's caused a little bit of grief for his top 3 hopes. Well, this has really taken the sting out of this race, I think we can probably say. Quick run through of the order. Shannon Wright, comfortable margin. We can just cruise home from here. He's done the fastest lap of the race at a 105.847, which is actually now the fastest lap overall of the night, even faster than the qualifying lap that Nathan Higginson put together, which was an 105.875, if I can get my words out correctly. And Wright currently lapping in the mid 6s comfortably at the moment. Mitch in second. His best lap is a 7 flat, which is actually not too bad considering the level of skill needed to run around this circuit and the amount of practice that he would have had, which is basically nothing. So he's still plodding along. Glenn Miles, 3rd place. This would be another podium finish for him. Just again, nice and consistent, keeping himself going. And just keep those points ticking over and ticking over and ticking over as it all goes along. Then you go back to the first car that is 1 lap, or the only car as well, that's 1 lap down in the 2nd place man in the championship, Nathan Higginson. Needs a real miracle from here. John Wright is 5th place, 2 laps down, but he is under no direct threat from Brian Walsh behind. And again, missing a couple of apexes, but now that he's out on the track, we're going to go and have a look at the rules and the standings, and we'll just see how things go. I believe if he continues to circulate, he will get some points for crossing the line. And Dane Liccardo still in the lane. And it looks like Dane's going nowhere. Got confirmation that at this stage he's not going anywhere, but we will have a chance to obviously have a chat to him after the race is over, because he did get a podium finish in race number 1. So we will have a chance to have a chat to him while she gets out of Shannon Wright's way. And we'll now have a chance to plug a 6th place finish into our provisional point standings for Brian Walsh as well, given his circulating. Go and take a look at the rules. Having a look just to see what the situation is with the points. Doesn't actually say that you need to be maintaining a certain number of percentage of the finishing laps to be classified, which is good. Usually, in a lot of cases, it's somewhere between 75 and 90% of the race distance to be classified. With Walsh being 8 laps down, he's yet to even knock over half the distance. So the good thing is based on previous experience with people such as Brian Munn not being able to complete a huge amount of laps, but being able to complete it, have some issues, get out of the server, get back in and keep circulating. we are led to believe that Brian Walsh will have a 6th place finish awarded to his name. And so that means provisional points as they stand right now. It will still be, the top 3 will still be as they were coming into tonight's race. So it'll still be Shannon Wright from Nathan Higginson and John Wright. And then Liccardo, despite the DNF, will be ahead of Jamie Nankervis for 4th place. So Nankervis will drop to 5th. Marwood will remain in 6th place on the standings. Brian Walsh will jump ahead of Termo and Brett Willis, and he'll find himself in 7th place if the 6th place finish is upheld. If the 6th place finish is not upheld, he'll be 8th and Willis will be 7th. That's how that one will work. And then when we get down to 8th place, said Brett Willis, Glenn Miles will get into the top 10. He will be 9th, regardless of what happens with the situation concerning Brian Walsh and the DNF and point standings in 6th place. So he will be 9th in car 69. So he'll make his way in, and that will put the flying brick Volvo, which literally looks like a brick when you see it on there on the track, of Termo, down to 10th place with 377 points. And then that means that Dylan Call, who is not here tonight, is the man on the outside of the top 10 looking in on 318 points. And that's a pretty decent margin. That's 72 points. So he would need a miracle to break into that top 10 if he turns up for the final round at Newcastle. Now, despite the fact that the top 3 are on the lead lap, Shannon Wright is about to commence his final lap. So we had to fight a lot harder for his 2nd place finish in race 1. And there's going to be a lot said after the 2nd race tonight. I'd imagine there will be a lot of chatter and a lot of discussion about how the drive-through penalty was not able to be served for Dane Liccardo. What could have been, and he tried to serve it. If it didn't clear, then he's had a few issues, and there will no doubt be a whole bunch of hot-headed discussions, I'd imagine, if anything I've seen recently is to go by. So he got the fastest lap, and he's got the win in this one, Shannon Wright. Home and hose quite comfortably. Didn't lead all the laps and didn't start from the pole, but let's count all the wins on the season. 1 in Adelaide, 2 in Barbagallo, 1 in the Gold Coast, 1 at the Bend, 2 at Queensland Raceway, Bathurst, double in Singapore, and this one is his first race win since Bahrain. So he's gone 3 rounds without a race win, and he finally chalks up race win as we count them up. 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12. 12 race wins on the season for Shannon Wright from 27 races. And by far and above the most wins of any driver this season. Lion Mitch will be a distant second, and in fact he really started to drift back towards Glenn Miles throughout that stint. His last lap was a minute 10.6 to Miles' 8.8. So I think maybe just starting to run out of tyres at the back end of this one. But he will get a 2nd place finish. Good result. And podium finish for Glenn Miles. Another podium. So at the last one was all the way back at Sandown, where the good mates Brian Walsh and Glenn Miles had a couple of podiums between them. Higginson has managed to finish 4th. John Wright's managed to finish 5th. And Brian Walsh 6th, and Liccardo, of course, the non-finisher after that one. And I'm sure Shannon Wright has just pulled up at that part of the circuit just to gather his thoughts and just wonder what on earth happened in that race, because even we were struggling to figure out what was going on. And a few drivers just now starting to celebrate their finishing positions, and Limich promptly, I think, maybe destroys an engine there. Well, a completely unexpected twist in that last race. We were scratching our heads trying to work out what on earth was going on. We've now finally worked it out that the drive-through penalty that may have been applied by the looks of things for Dane Liccardo was not able to be served, and that then kicked off a chain reaction of the who, what, when, where and why. So we needed to try and figure out how that affected the championship. And unfortunately for Higginson, the gearbox problems means that he's had a bit of a terrible time with all of this as well. Expecting to see a bit of a flood of drivers coming into the broadcast booth in the next couple of minutes or so, as they've all had a chance to prepare themselves, I guess, for what questions I might throw at them. I haven't even decided what questions I want to throw at them just yet, but they're all starting to turn up. But what we might do in this instance is we might go through the order as it started based on the race one finishing positions. We'll get the early one out the way first. And that one will start with the man in second spot in the championship in Nathan Higginson. So, Nathan, looking at race one, went probably as well as it could have gone for you, starting off the front row. Fastest lap in that one, led every lap, had the pole as well, so you got the Grand Chelem for race number one, and that was setting you up quite nicely for starting to reel in Shannon Wright championship-wise, but then race two did not go according to plan. Talk us through your night.
Yeah, first race was awesome. Qualifying was awesome. Yeah, first race, it was just got away from a good start, and I had Dane holding up Shannon behind me, and it was a bit of a good feeling to see those two, slowly disappear into the distance. And then race two comes around. I'm basically doing the exact same thing Dane did, just trying to make my car as wide as possible. And I've got a problem with my shifter where if it's sitting in second gear and I nudge it a bit too far, it actually engages fourth without me knowing. And it had done that on the run up to turn one. And I hadn't had an idea of what happened until I looked over and saw the damage indicator said my gearbox was gone.
Well, there you go. That'll be precisely what it is, and the reason why you slipped down the order in the couple of opening few laps in that second race. From my point of view, as you said, making your car as wide as possible. There's a nice little scrap in the opening couple of laps, particularly up at the top end of the course between yourself, Dano and Shannon, in that opening one, and it looked like it was all pretty fair and reasonable as well. Everyone looking for position and everyone was giving each other some space. So from your perspective, I think you're probably thinking it was a good battle and it was good and fair, but it just came that little bit unstuck for you at the wrong moment. And I can tell by the sigh there, he's precisely right. So, well, what unfortunately that means for you is there is, based on the current predictions we have at the moment,
60-point gap.
It's not as bad as you think. If we actually do the math now, it's 29 points. So your fourth place, it's gone from being 21 to 29. It actually been cut down to 19 after race one, and this is of course all hearsay, but it's not insurmountable. It does mean that you need things to go your way at the next round, but look, you've got another win on the board. You've done pretty well so far, and all you can keep doing is keep your head down, I guess, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. He's hoping we get the track early, because I think for I think for the last round, I think it's probably, the round that I've put most practice into over the whole season, because I just want to gel with the car beforehand, know the track, know the lines, know where I can defend, know where I can overtake beforehand, so that, it gives me the best chance of winning.
Yep, certainly does. The more practice you put in, the more attuned you become. And, well, we wish you good luck for
Thank
next
you.
week to see how it all goes. Let's go to the man in second place, and then after him we'll throw to the third place man for race one as well. But Shannon, from my point of view, that was an intense battle in race number one. You threw the kitchen sink at Dane Liccardo for 18 and three-quarter laps, and eventually you finally got through.
Mate, I'll tell you what. I actually said to the boys, I said, I've got no energy to race that second race. Man, that was an intense battle. The only way you could make it move was you had to try and make the actual the car to move aside or something like that. And that's why I was giving me a couple of little hits and everything. But it was all racing. We're given each a racing room. We hit a couple of times. We addressed it. And it was just an awesome battle. But the most frustrating thing was watching that green Commodore getting further and further in front. I was going, no way. But yeah, nah, it was awesome, dude.
Yep, and from my point of view, I quite enjoyed it as well. And then the different strengths and weaknesses of the two cars as well. You had the advantage being able to dance through a lot of the corners. The mid-corner pace of the Volvo was very good at a track we expected it to be quite good. Dane had better drive off a number of corners, especially off of turn 7, so he was able to out-drag you to turn 8, even if you managed to draw alongside in that opening lap. And you're right, you did have a couple of moments where there was a little bit of contact. I think it was one each, and you both gave it back, so that was all fair and above board. And then in race number 2, at the very beginning, you got down to business pretty quickly.
Mate, I knew that red Commodore was going to be wide again, so I thought, hang on a minute. If they're teammates, he's going to allow Higginson through. So I stayed on his Higgins as much as I could.
Yep, sure did. And as we've alluded to before, you take a 29-point gap into the final round at Newcastle, and like Nathan, we wish you the very best of luck for what lies ahead for those pair of races.
Hey guys, I just want to give a quick shout out to Brett Willis. As you know, he hasn't been making the grid lately. Guys, he's been in a bad way. He had a tumour removed between his forehead. He's been going through a bit of depression and everything like that. So, like, I went around seeing how he was, mate. If this is anything, I'll do this win for him. But he was so looking forward to making the grid. But yeah, obviously couldn't concentrate.
Yep, and we send our regards as well. Of course, fighting anything of that nature is definitely not a battle that we want to envy, I guess, as we call it. It's one of those battles that is extremely hard to recover from, let alone find the energy and the mental capacity to be able to get up and do something that you enjoy. So all the best for Brett. We go over to the man in third place for race one, Dane. And I know you're going to be a bit disappointed with what happened in race number 2, but we're going to leave that one alone because we know the backstory behind it now. But your defensive driving in race number 1 was probably one of the best defensive drives I've ever seen in my life. People call me the defender because they don't like wanting to get past me in some of the races that I've been partaking in, and I take my hat off to you for the effort that you did, but it just maybe was a little bit too much. What do you think?
Yeah, at the end, my tyres just gave way and I slid out a bit, and Shannon got the better exit and the inside, and I just had nothing at turn just before the last chicane. I could not fight it. I just had no grip.
Well, we know with the tyres for the VL Commodores that you've been forced to use the mediums for the most of the season. The soft tyre just hasn't been the tyre of choice. The VL tends to eats it more quickly than you can get through a bowl of cereal.
You can't get to a lap in them.
Yeah, exactly. So the one question that I have on this regard is with the medium tyre. How was it trying to make it last a full distance? Because, of course, we didn't have pit stops tonight, so you couldn't just throw on a brand new set at the halfway point and then just go for it. You had to make them last. So Nathan, we heard, had a puncture late in that race one. What was the state of tyres on your rig?
They were still pretty good. They didn't burst. They were just very slidey, I guess you could say. I tried to replicate what I did at Lakeside, and It's somewhat worked up until when I got past.
Well, from our point of view, a little bit sad to see what happened to you in race 2. Of course, it'll be a bit of a source of debate during the week, one would imagine. It means for you, you've moved up to 4th in the championship. You've moved ahead of Jamie Nankervis based on the current predictions, but it is going to be, I guess, a little bit of a tall order to move up to 3rd place, and might be a bit of a bridge too far with 36 points the gap, but anything is possible, and like I said, there's always next week. And on to the man who finished in 3rd place in race number 2 in Glenn Miles. Glenn, another podium finish, and again, nice little run of form you got going here. For the last couple of rounds, 4th and 2nd, 4th and 4th, and 4th and 3rd in probably what's been the best part of your season so far.
Yeah, thanks very much. The cars are sort of starting to come alive, and I don't know, maybe it's taking this long just to get it to go right, but it's going very well.
And from my point of view, consistently well as well. Like your lap times that we saw in qualifying were, in the low 8s, which was really good. Consistently in the 8s during the race, and got down to an 8 flat at one point as well in one of those races for your fastest lap. So from my point of view, not just the best part of your season, but your consistency in the car. And as you said, finding the car just starting to come alive, you're starting to feel really at one with the car, and it's starting to be reflected in your pace. You definitely held your own out there tonight, and I was suitably impressed to just see your form just starting to go up and up and up every single round that we see you out there. So it's a credit to you. Well done.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I was quite happy to be 4th. I don't want to with Dane or something, but I was aiming for 4th because I didn't think I'd get any further than 4th.
Well, at the end of the day, these last little points finishes you've been piling together over the last 3 to 4 weeks have seen you jump into the top 10 in the standings. So good to see you up in there. Good to see your name that's going to be on the graphic for the broadcast next week. And we'll see you.
Awesome.
We'll see you for Newcastle.
No, I didn't realise that at all. Thank you very much. Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's one to take to the bank and go home and have a cold one. And likewise for me, it's time to go home. Well, I am home already, but it's time to go and have a cold one. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Season finale is in 1 week's time for a pair of races at Newcastle. It's a place that these cars have never ever been before and will probably never ever see in real life. But we'll see you in the sim racing world next week. Please drive safely. See you then. Bye for now.